In this video, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about the MXR Pro Series and MXR Standard range of cables. Hi guys, I'm Tyler and you're watching the All You Need to Know Bass show here on my channel. This is the show where I take you through a piece of gear and show you everything you need to know to make the most informed purchase decisions you can. In this show, I'm going to be comparing the MXR Standard Series cable and the MXR Pro Series cable. I'm going to run you through a head-to-head comparison and let you know which of these I would go for and the drawbacks and positives of each. I do a video like this every week on my channel, so if this is something that you're interested in, you enjoy this video, consider hitting the subscribe button, hit that like button and hit that notification bell too. So I've been a long time user of Dunlop strings on my basses. I particularly like the super bright Ranger strings, and MXR are part of the Dunlop organisation, and I always thought it would be worth checking out their cables and seeing what they were like. They were always seemed to be available for a pretty decent amount of money, you know, comparable to Planet Waves and Fender cables, that kind of price range. So we're talking kind of the lower end of things really, and I thought it'd just be worth checking out their cables and particularly seeing what they were like head to head. There's not much talk online about their cables, and there's not really many reviews around, so I thought I would kind of fill that gap by taking a look at these cables. In this video I'm going to do a comparison of them. I don't know whether it will come across on YouTube, but I think it's worth a go. So I'm going to record the same bass with both cables, the same parts, just on its own, to give you an idea of if there is any tonal difference between these cables. With YouTube compression and stuff, it may not be possible to do that, but I think it's worth a go. I'm also going to give you my views on the cables. I've had them for a few months. I wanted to have them for a few months and use them to see what they were like on gigs, how they performed and how they behaved, things like that. So I'm going to give you an overall review of these cables. First of all, I'm going to start out with the cables themselves and their build quality and just talk about them and their overview and features. So this is the MXR Standard cable. This is the cheaper of the two. I think this cost me around £12–13, so not very much at all. This is the 10-foot length, so not too long, and it comes with the right angled jack as well. I think the build quality on this cable is pretty decent. It has the removable ends, so you just unscrew them to reveal the internal parts, so the solder joint and everything. Much like the Fender standard cable, the cheaper Fender cables, it has this white jacket around the end of the cable. That white jacket goes across the exposed wiring as well, keeps that protected and adds a little bit of rigidity to the end of the cable as it makes connection inside the jack connector. One thing I would say is that the logo has worn off. It has an MXR logo on the outside of the white part, and that has pretty much worn off and is wearing off with use. And then we've got the same on the other end with the straight jack as well, exactly the same. Easily untwists and reveals the white joint, cable joint. Inside the jack there is a decent amount of isolation around the connection point, so actually fairly well built inside, fairly rigid and not easily accessible, which should enable it to have a little bit of a longer life. The cable itself is marked as an MXR instrument cable made of oxygen-free copper, and is marked as a Dunlop Manufacturing Incorporated product. The cable itself is quite thick, and I think it's not really particularly rigid. It's less rigid than you find on a more premium cable. It's particularly bendy, which I think probably isn't necessarily a good thing. I think it serves to potentially reduce the life of the cable, being that the copper inside it is being bent around quite so much and quite so freely. At the same time, you could say that it's a hefty amount of rubber to protect the cable, but to me it doesn't feel like a super high quality cable. Moving on, we have the Dunlop Pro Series cable. This is again a 10-foot length cable. I wanted it to be a direct comparison, so particularly for the tonal aspect of the review, the sound's not going to be affected by the length of the cable. And a very similar construction really. Instead of the white ends we have a black end, rubber mount underneath the cable lock. Again, that wraps around all the wiring, adds a little bit of rigidity to the end of the cable. Again, exactly the same construction really as the standard cable inside. Not seeing any difference. They're the same jacks as well. So these are the same jack ends as we use on the standard cable, and they're just silver jacks. Nothing fancy on them. No plating or anything like that. Same thing on the straight end as well. As you can see, black coating to defend the cable from wear, and the same isolation inside. The MXR logo again on the black part, again kind of rubbing off on both ends of it. This cable is, I think, it's still fairly thick and still quite flexible, so not much difference between this and the standard cable, though I do think it is a little more resistant. It's a little bit more rigid than the standard cable. I think the standard cable is even a little bit more rubbery and a little bit fatter than this cable. Again, this cable is labelled on the cable itself with, this is labelled as MXR Pro Series instrument cable, oxygen free copper. Like the standard cable, it's 24 AWG, and then built by Dunlop Manufacturing Incorporated. So pretty much the same cables when you look at them on the inside. They seem to have the same jack connectors. They're pretty much the same cable, though, as I say. I think the Pro Series is a little thinner but a little bit more rigid, but not much in it. And then the same construction with the twistable jacks to get to the cable, and then the rubber jacket around the wiring internally. At this point, I'm going to do the tone comparison between the two. So both of these cables will be used straight into an Avalon U5 DI, which I think is the most clean, crisp and transparent DI that I own, and one of the most clean, crisp, transparent DIs available on the market. I'm going to be playing my NTD AG5 USA bass. I think this is the most full range bass that I own. I think it will best reflect the quality of the cables if there are any differences to be heard. And I'm going to play this with the bass on full and the treble on full to give you a brighter, crisper signal and more bottom end. I think that will test the cables a little bit better. So yeah, let's go straight to that demo. I'm going to play the same part on both basses, just to see if we can get a direct comparison of the two cables. So that was the tone demo section of the video. Let me know which you thought sounded better in the comments below. I'm just going to give you my opinion on which cable I would go for and my thoughts on the two, any of the differences between them, and why I would go for each of them. I think the standard cable is an okay cable. It's not a great cable. It does a job. If you're playing live, I think this cable will get you quite far. It's not got, I don't think it has as much detail in the sound as the Pro cable does. I think it's not going to last that long with how flexible they are, but if you need a cable that's going to provide a decent sound, probably last you a year or so, and is not too expensive if you're gigging fairly regularly, I would consider going for a standard cable. I think in terms of the tone, I don't think that the top end is there to the extent that it is with the Pro cable or other high quality cables. I think it mutes the top end a bit. I actually found that was quite a nice quality with my double bass, but I do kind of notice a little bit of a sacrifice in the tone with the the standard cable when I use it. On the other hand, we've got the Pro cable, and I just felt as soon as I plugged it in, there was a difference in the sound from the MTD going straight into the DI. I think it was more textured in the mid-range and the top end, and I think the bottom end was less boomy. I think it was more defined. I think overall this cable, the Pro cable, offers a more defined tone. I'm really looking at it, the only difference has got to be the cable. It is slightly thinner, it's not quite as flexible as the standard cable. It feels like potentially a slightly nicer rubberized texture. And that's gonna, I think this cable will last you a little bit longer. I think it's worth it for the tone quality improvements. I personally would just go with the Pro Series cables and give the standard series cables a miss. The other thing I need to note and tell you about and be really honest is that the Pro Series cable, I've never had any problems with it, particularly with passive bases. Sometimes the Avalon DI has a strange reaction to different cables with different passive bases, but with the Pro Series I've never had a problem. However, with the standard series and my passive P base, for example, the Avalon starts to exhibit all sorts of strange noises and things that it doesn't with my Monster cable or with the Pro Series cable. So for me, I'm afraid that the standard series would have to go by the wayside, and I probably wouldn't be using these again in the future. I would definitely go for the Pro Series cable from MXR. So there we have it. For me, the winner is the MXR Pro Series cable. As you'd expect, it's a little bit more expensive, and I think that little bit extra expense is worth it. I think these cables will last a little bit longer, despite the fact that you're getting very much the same features in terms of the jacks and how they're constructed. I do feel like it's a better cable overall, and I felt that from the first minute that I took it out of the packet. So those are my conclusions when it comes to the MXR range of cables. I would give the standard series a miss and just go straight for that Pro Series and spend that little bit more. Let me know in the comments below if you're using MXR cables and what your thoughts are on them. Could you tell in this video comparison the difference between the two? Did you notice any tonal differences, or did you think that what my perceptions were different to what you thought? Let me know that in the comments too. I hope this video has been useful to you. As I say, there's not much in terms of reviews on these cables, so hopefully this has given you something to go by if you're considering these cables. If this video has been helpful to you, please consider subscribing, hitting that like button because that helps me out and spreading the word of the channel, and consider hitting that notification bell too if you subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you again soon.